Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Marine Corps Suicide Prevention Podcast, where we talk about, and address the physical, mental, spiritual, and social components of the prevention of death by suicide. I'm your host, Dr. TJ Owen, Suicide Prevention Capability Section Head in Behavior Programs at Headquarters, Marine Corps. The Connect podcast series is dedicated to the promotion of suicide prevention throughout the Marine Corps. During this episode, we will discuss ways that individual Marines and sailors can connect and communicate better with one another. One of the initiatives used in support of this effort within the Marine Corps is the COSC program, or Combat Operational Stress Control Program. In some places, it's simply referred to as OSCR, Operational Stress Control and Readiness, but it is important to understand that this is the resource for the program, and the doctrine is actually Combat Operational Stress Control. In any case, it is the program's point or purpose in existing to help people identify and mediate the stressors that are in the lives of Marines and sailors. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with First Sergeant Swanner. First Sergeant Swanner was recently selected for Sergeant Major within the Marine Corps. First Sergeant Swanner is known here locally at 2MEF for his participation and support of the COSC program and principles. First Sergeant, please introduce yourself to our listeners. And as you do, if you do me the favor and tell them a little bit about how you became familiar with the COSC program.
Absolutely, Doctor, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
I entered the Marine Corps in 10 November 2003, and so I'm coming up on my 19-year anniversary and the celebration of our Corps, so it's a special day for me in two regards.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I initially joined as an infantryman, as an anti-tank guided missile gunner, and I served within the division for 4 years in that capacity, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But as I came towards the end of my first enlistment, I also met my wife, Heather, and as we discussed our future together, we were taking a look at it and deciding what was going to be best for us. And while she was wholly supportive of me staying in the Marine Corps, she wasn't a natural fan of me being in an infantry unit, and I can respect that. And so we talked about what other options exist, and we settled on becoming a firefighter in the Marine Corps. So I was an expeditionary fire and rescue, and I did that for a good portion of my career as well. I've also served in a special duty assignment as a recruiter, and I've been very fortunate to serve as a senior enlisted advisor in the capacity as a first sergeant, and as you addressed in the introduction, that the Marine Corps will give me an opportunity to continue in that capacity for hopefully many years to come. So I very much enjoy this lifestyle and the service that it has allowed me to be within. Now, in regards to the COSC program, I must admit I didn't fully recognize or understand the value of COSC and OSCR until I needed the principles myself. In 2018, I was faced with a personal tragedy in which I used these principles regularly. I just didn't know what they were called or how to shape them. Mm-hmm. But that recognition had inspired me to then want to learn more about these principles and then to become a teacher to others, so that if they found themselves in a time of crisis or with stressors, that they could employ them and know what they are.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for your service. And I can't help but notice the breadth of experience that you've had across the Marine Corps throughout your career. COSC at its center, the principles have core leadership functions called SMITR. And you kind of alluded to that, so we can go ahead and talk about that. And these principles or these leadership functions are strengthen, mitigate, identify, treat, and reintegrate. And they outline for leadership very clearly how they can intervene in the lives of our service members and get them back on track. Can you tell us how these functions have allowed you to be an effective leader for your Marines?
Yes, Doctor. And SMITR, to me, it serves as a reminder that I need to know my Marines and my sailors. Mm-hmm. But it's not just limited to that audience. This extends to my family and to my friend networks as well. These principles go across the whole gamut because it's about connecting with people. Mm-hmm. And we talk about baseline quite a bit in COSC and in the OSCR program. And that's where it all starts. I can't truly strengthen someone if I don't know the areas where they need to be reinforced, or their areas of weakness, to help build those up. So when we're talking whether that's physical, mental, spiritual, social, I need to know the individual in order to help strengthen that. Mm-hmm. Conversely, I can't progress through that model of helping them to mitigate the stressors in their life if I'm not recognizing an increase of stress in their lives. And that's part of the identification. I can't identify that if I don't know those individuals. Then I won't be able to help them to get the treatment that's appropriate for that, and then ultimately to reintegrate and continue to join the team back and into the fight if I don't know my Marines. So SMITR serves as a model for me, reminding me that I need to know my Marines.
All right, that's definitely helpful, First Sergeant. So let me ask you another question. How does this work when a Marine or sailor needs to seek help or mental health support? How does it work then?
Well, Doc, if I'm using this model, SMITR, then I'll know their baselines. And that makes it easier for me to identify if something is off, as well as identify what appropriate means there are to treat that issue, whatever that issue may be. And that may include mental health support.
Okay. Well, when it comes to stigma and mental health and suicide prevention, we often talk about changing the conversation. Can you speak about how COSC has helped you as a leader address stigma and how it has helped you develop a climate that allows your Marines to feel like they can talk about these things and the stressors that they are confronted with being in the military throughout their life?
Yes, Doctor. Again, COSC and Oscar, they focus on leader and team members modeling the desired behaviors and for those that they're around, their sphere of influence. But before you get after those behaviors, you have to start with the attitudes. And this is what I call the ABC construct. So attitudes, behaviors, and culture. You have to go after the way that we think about things or our beliefs about something. And if there's a negative stigma there, then that needs to be addressed. We need to change the way we're thinking and our attitudes towards seeking help and care for things. And that'll then impact the decisions we make, the choices we make, which ultimately impacts the behaviors of the unit. And when you have those behaviors starting to make that shift away from stigmas and seeking care, then that's how you impact that culture. That's how you create a climate, as you said, to be a positive one where Marines and sailors are unafraid to speak about their challenges, the stresses they're facing, to get the care that they need so that they can come back into the team, a profitable member of that team.
Okay, well, tell us a little bit about your team, First Sergeant.
Well, my team, I'm fortunate that I have a commander who understands these principles, who's given me audience to express the importance of these principles and how it impacts unit readiness. And so we've established a local policy here where our team will get together on a regular basis. And it may be individuals coming together on a monthly basis to talk about trends, to reinforce our training practices, our policies. But certainly quarterly, we're getting together with the entire Oscar team, and we recognize ourselves as sensors to the commander throughout the force. And we have Marines from the entry level on through the company level leadership and to include the command team. That we have a network of sensors to identify the anomalies, recognition of what our baselines are within our respective areas, to be able to identify them, to help get Marines in the treatment or reintegration that they need in a timely fashion to where we're not reactive in this measure. And by building those practices in place and making those recurring things, there's continuous buy-in, it impacts the culture, the establishment that we're trying to do here. And I think that that's really brought a lot of value to where, again, we can be proactive in a lot of our initiatives where we're not waiting annually for a deox or for a crisis to happen to where everyone's getting together. We're talking about these things on a consistent basis to where we can get ahead of them and address them appropriately.
That's awesome, First Sergeant. Let me tell you something. I participated in an audit of the suicide prevention program in the Marine Corps. And one of the things that I learned about when I was going through that process was that not everybody is aware of this program, these principles, or the benefits that they can find in there for our Marines and sailors. So how can commanders and subordinate leaders like sergeant majors implement these principles in their unit?
Well, Doctor, as you said, I think it's got to start with the awareness piece as well. So I think that the focus has to be education and then the recognition of what these principles and programs can do. And I liken it to our war fighting doctrine. So MCDP 1.
Mhm.
Like, no one needs to tell commanders or senior enlisted leaders to prepare for war or war fighting actions. They do it naturally because they recognize that that's why their unit exists. That's why the Marine Corps exists. And MCDP provides a framework, a philosophy of thought that drives all of their actions. Interestingly, in MCDP 1, we find that it is the human dimension that is central to war. And it is the human will instilled through leadership that is the driving force for all actions. And so it's people, not programs necessarily. And when commanders and senior enlisted leaders are educated about this and the resources that exist, we find that same framework for thinking within COSC. We know what stressors, what challenges, what the enemy looks like out there in the force, and then what resources exist, what programs exist, so we can better equip ourselves to engage with these battles, whether it's suicide, depression, or any other challenges that our Marines, sailors, and their families are facing.
That's awesome, First Sergeant. I love the way you bring the warfighting aspect into that and the human aspects and elements that we have to deal with. I want to go back to the subject of stigma before we get too far away from it. One of the core leadership functions in SMITR that we're talking about is reintegration. So how can leaders set the stage for a Marine or sailor who's had a suicide-related event to come back into the unit?
Doctor, I think you set the stage with the very first letter, that S, that strength. You can't wait until the time for reintegration to occur if you want to do it well. Within that structure, that construct, that SMITR aspect, we'll find, specifically within strengthen, you're going to find what we call total fitness. And this includes the physical, mental, spiritual, social, the things that you mentioned in the very beginning of this podcast. And in my opinion, one of those core ones is going to be the social aspect when we're talking about reintegration. It's the connections that we build with our Marines. It's going back to knowing them again and building those meaningful relationships that if a Marine sailor needs to depart the unit for any reason to receive specialized care, that we maintain that connection. We maintain that social connection that we're building, that we're strengthening, so that when the time of reintegration comes, it becomes a seamless transition. We may not know all the ins and outs of what occurred during that time of specialized care, but we know that Marine, and we can have a better understanding of what they need to be reintegrated in a profitable way that helps them and the team build up that strength again.
Awesome, First Sergeant. Thank you for that. And that's very helpful. There have been working groups. I'm not sure if you're familiar with they're happening, but at the department level in the military, there have been working groups concerning stigma and the impacts to a person standing within the unit when they get mental health help and then return to the unit. So the beliefs that are out there, to my knowledge, have to do with, being a burden to your peers, or you're not able to be the hard-hitting player within your unit. So your whole status changes because you got mental health help. And a lot of people, this is really a barricade between them getting help, being in a place where they know they need help, but they don't want to do it because of some of these things. What would you say to someone who's thinking like that, First Sergeant?
I would offer that not seeking care is actually worse for the individual and for the unit. I mean, it's the hidden threats that are catastrophic, whether they're on a battlefield or in our personal lives. It's the things that we hide or turn away from to not make a big deal that often come out to surface to be one of the most significant and biggest deals that we're confronted with. So I would encourage someone to seek to care, because we do have programs and we have a structure to where we can implement this well for the individual to seek the care that they need to become the strongest, best version of themselves that they can be, and return back into that team to be a profitable member of that team, making that team even stronger through their shared experiences, now educating others of what resources and opportunities happen because they've lived that out. They've experienced it and they've reaped the benefits from it that could then in turn become a benefit to another. And that makes the team strong, and that will ensure that that cultural shift occurs and that we're doing the right things to be ready when we need to be.
First, that is an awesome call to action. One of the things that we have identified concerning mental health as we move through the COVID-19 pandemic is that there is a need to connect. This need is so important that the Department of Defense has set as their theme for suicide prevention, connect to protect. The Marine Corps has the benefit of the COSC principles. This allows members to connect in every way possible, especially with one another. Every leader in the Marine Corps is encouraged to implement the COSC principles and the OSC program within your unit as you fight isolation and you facilitate the supportive internal connections among your troops. Thanks for listening to the Marine Corps Suicide Prevention Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. T.J. Owens, reminding everyone that suicide is preventable if we empower ourselves and others with the knowledge, tools, and resources needed. If you want to know more about how to get involved, check us out at the Manpower Reserve and Affairs website. You can also email us at hqmcspc@usmc.mil. If you or someone you know is in crisis or at risk for suicide, reach out and connect with care. You can also call the Military Crisis Line at 988, just press 1, or Military One Source at 800-342-9647.